The Capitol felt unusually tense. Reporters packed the hallway outside the Oversight Committee chamber. Sensing something massive was about to drop, cameras were already rolling before Senator Chris Van Hollen even stepped into view. But when he finally appeared, holding a thick black folder stamped preliminary findings, the atmosphere shifted instantly. This wasn't just another routine statement. This felt like the opening move in a political earthquake. He approached the podium calmly, let the silence build, and then spoke with chilling clarity. Over the last 6 months, Van Hollen began, my investigative team has uncovered what appears to be a concealed financial network involving an estimated $8.7 million. These funds were allegedly funneled through corporate fronts connected to individuals tied to both Bondi and Patel. A wave of murmurs erupted among reporters. Some were already typing frantically. Others just stared, stunned. Van Hollen continued. What we have uncovered suggests a deliberate pattern of offshore routing, shell company layering, and suspicious political donations that may have been used to obscure the original source of the funds. Outside the chamber, political strategists were already making urgent phone calls. Inside, staffers exchanged wide-eyed glances. The phrase Bondi-Patel Network was already trending before he even finished his statement. Van Hollen paused, placing both hands on the podium. This is not a conclusion, he clarified. This is the beginning of a deeper probe. But make no mistake, we are prepared to call for formal hearings, subpoenas, and forensic tracing of every cent involved. Somewhere across town, phones were buzzing in panic. The story had just been launched, and there was no turning back. The moment Van Hollen's statement hit major news outlets, 2 names lit up every political chatroom, strategist thread, and late-night newsroom monitor. Bondi and Patel. In a sleek downtown office, a man in a tailored suit slammed his phone on the desk. Who leaked the transfers? He growled. No one answered. The room was silent, too silent. Across the city, another figure watched the press conference replay on mute, eyes narrowed. She didn't speak a word, but the tightening of her jaw said everything. They hadn't expected this level of exposure. Meanwhile, pressure in Washington was rising fast. On Capitol Hill, aides scrambled as journalists flooded inboxes with questions. Political analysts speculated live. If Van Hollen can prove the existence of a laundering pipeline-tied to political influence operations, this could trigger federal hearings. Others were more blunt. This could reshape multiple careers or end them. Inside Van Hollen's office, the atmosphere was intense but focused. A confidential war room had been set up for the investigation team. Screens displayed suspicious transaction charts, offshore accounts, and connecting names blurred in red circles. One of the analysts pointed at a highlighted entry. Here, Cayman Islands transfer, routed through a consulting firm with barely any operational history, she said. A junior aide added, that firm links to a P.O. box previously tied to a Bondi fundraising committee. The room went quiet. Van Hollen nodded slowly. This is bigger than we thought, he said. Outside, the public reaction exploded. Social media erupted with hashtags like hashtag Bondi-Patel Scheme and hashtag 8.7 Million Trail. People demanded answers. Commentators debated whether arrests were imminent or if this was just the tip of the iceberg. But in private circles, fear had begun to spread. And somewhere in the shadows, damage control strategies were already being written. Fast, be why the following morning, Capitol Hill was in full political lockdown mode. Congressional offices were screening calls. Legal teams were being summoned, and the press was circling like hawks. Every insider knew, when financial trails surface, someone eventually flips. In Van Hollen's war room, a new development had emerged overnight. A forensic accountant named Marissa Clark, previously quiet and reserved, stood in front of a timeline projected across the screen. Her voice was steady. We traced multiple transfers originating from a private consulting firm in Miami. That firm appears to be a financial shell, and one of its advisors has past ties to Patel's fundraising circle. Van Hollen leaned forward. Is there a direct link? Marissa exhaled. Not yet, but a second route, through a Denver-based nonprofit, leads toward Bondi. A silence followed. The senator didn't have to say it. The circle was narrowing. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, A discreet meeting was underway in a luxury penthouse on the East Coast. Phones were left at the door. Curtains were drawn. The individuals present were calm. On the outside, one voice finally broke the tension. "This is an optics war now. We discredit the investigation before they connect the final dots." Another responded sharply. "If even one insider testifies, the entire structure collapses." A third voice, deeper and colder, said quietly, "Then we make sure no one does." The room fell silent again. Back in Washington, Van Hollen's team was preparing formal requests for bank subpoena approvals. Statements were being drafted. Legal counsel advised caution. Once subpoenas were filed, the investigation would become fully public and legally binding. "Are you ready for the backlash?" one advisor asked. Van Hollen didn't blink. The backlash confirms were close. And beyond the Capitol, a low-level financial contractor who had unknowingly processed one of the flag transfers sat alone in his apartment, watching the coverage. His breathing was unsteady. He remembered the strange instructions he got months ago. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. He stared at it. Did they want to silence him or recruit him? He didn't answer. But deep down, he already knew he would have to choose a side. The financial contractor's name was Ethan Roy. To most, he was just a mid-level analyst in a quiet compliance division. But Ethan knew something that almost no one else did. He had flagged one of the suspicious transfers months earlier, and his supervisor told him to let it go. He didn't know the full scope then. But now, watching Van Hollen lay out the network, he understood exactly what he had stumbled into. That night, Ethan sat alone on his small balcony, the city lights below blurring through uncertainty. His phone lit up again, same private number, no message. He didn't answer. Meanwhile, at Van Hollen's investigation office, Marissa Clark updated the team. "We now have 5 shell companies, 3 nonprofits, and 1 fundraising entity connected in a suspicious pattern. The total still leads back to approximately 8.7 million routed over a 12-month period." Van Hollen crossed his arms. "We need a human source to confirm internal coordination, someone who can testify how the laundering was structured with intent." A junior legal advisor hesitated before speaking. Senator Ethan Roy, mid-level, Miami Compliance Division. He filed an internal note about a flag transfer matching one of our offshore routes. Marissa nodded. He could be the one. Van Hollen didn't hesitate. "Let's reach out quietly. Make sure he understands he'll be protected." But elsewhere, Ethan was already on someone else's radar. At a private firm that had handled parts of the routed funds, a senior operative spoke with chilling calm over the phone. "He hasn't spoken yet," she said, "but he's thinking about it. Keep it that way. And if he doesn't comply," a pause, "make him doubt his safety. Doubt is quieter than force." She ended the call. In the war room, Van Hollen's team finalized the first wave of subpoenas. They were ready to move toward formal investigation hearings. They knew once they filed, everything would accelerate, politically, legally, and personally. Van Hollen looked around the table. "There's no going back after this." No one disagreed. Ethan sat on his balcony, staring at the unknown caller ID one more time. Then another call came in, but this time, it wasn't a private number. It was from an unknown Washington line. He froze. Was this a threat or an opportunity to finally tell the truth? His finger hovered over the answer button. His decision could change everything. Ethan hesitated for a full 3 seconds before finally answering the Washington call. "Ethan Roy," a calm female voice asked. "Who is this?" he said cautiously. "My name is Marissa Clark," she replied. "I'm part of Senator Van Hollen's investigative team. We believe you may have encountered activity related to our ongoing financial probe. You are not in trouble, but you may be in a position to help." Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. I don't know what you think I know," he lied quietly. Marissa didn't press. "We understand your hesitation, but if you are willing to speak confidentially, protections can be arranged. If you've been pressured to stay silent, that pressure is a sign your information is valuable." Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then he whispered, "They've already called me. Twice. Unknown numbers. No messages." Marissa exchanged a sharp look with someone on her side of the call before replying, "We'll make arrangements. If you talk to us, you won't face us alone." She let that sit, then ended with, "When you're ready, call this number again. But understand, time is running out." Ethan ended the call and sat frozen, the weight of a choice pressing on him harder than ever: betray silence or betray himself. Across town, damage control intensifies. In the private penthouse where earlier panic had begun, the meeting reconvened in a darker tone. "He's in contact," one of them said bitterly. "We need leverage." Another responded, "Something that makes him think testifying would ruin him." A digital investigator nearby nodded. "We're digging into his financial records. If we can imply misconduct, we can discredit him before he even steps forward." The room hummed with ruthless intent. Back in Washington, Van Hollen's legal counsel prepared paperwork for preliminary witness protection protocols. "If Ethan confirms internal suppression of the flag transfer," the advisor explained, "it becomes intent, not negligence. That changes the legal territory completely." Van Hollen nodded grimly. He knew this was the pivot point. If Ethan flipped, the Bondi-Patel network could unravel rapidly. If he stayed silent, the defense could claim everything was misunderstood accounting. Later that night, Ethan sat in his dim living room, watching a news panel debate the case. One commentator said, "If even one internal employee confirms they were told to ignore red flags, this becomes a full-scale laundering conspiracy." Another countered, "Unless witnesses remain silent, and without testimony, investigations stall." Ethan muted the TV. His hand trembled slightly. Then, with a deep breath, he picked up his phone and dialed the number Marissa gave him. His voice was quiet but steady. "I'm ready to talk." Ethan arrived at the discreet federal office just after dawn, escorted quietly by two plainclothes security officers arranged through Van Hollen's staff. No cameras, no leaks, total silence. Inside, the war room had evolved. A new digital board listed priority witnesses, Ethan's name freshly added under confidential. Marissa Clark greeted him professionally, but with a reassuring calm. "You're safe here," she said. "But what we discuss today will have national implications." He nodded, swallowing hard. The testimony begins. They started slow. Marissa asked, "When did you first notice irregularities?" Ethan took a breath. 9 months ago. A flag transfer, large, fragmented, moving too fast through shell firms with almost no operational footprint. I raised it to my supervisor. What was the response? He told me it was politically protected and not worth attention. That sentence alone shifted the energy in the room. Marissa leaned forward. Did he mention specific names or entities? Yes. Ethan hesitated. He said the transfer was tied to donors aligned with Bondi and Patel circles. The room fell silent for a moment. Van Hollen, who had been listening behind a privacy screen, stepped forward for the first time. "Mr. Roy, will you state that under oath?" Ethan looked up, eyes weary but firm. "Yes." Across the city, the opposition learns the worst. In the penthouse, a message came through on a secure channel. He talked. A vase shattered against the wall. "Then our window just closed." One operative growled. Another pounded the table. "We need to push a counter-narrative now. Fake leaks. Frame him as unstable. Maybe suggest financial misconduct." The strategist in the corner nodded. "If he becomes discredited before official hearings, his testimony is weakened." Meanwhile, Van Hollen prepares for escalation. With Ethan's statements recorded under preliminary protection, Van Hollen convened a private assembly with legal advisors and senior investigators. "We now have confirmation of internal warnings being suppressed," his counsel summarized. "That upgrades the case from accidental oversight to potential conspiracy." Van Hollen issued a new directive. Proceed with formal subpoenas for involved firms, fundraising entities, and personal communications of involved parties, and prepare for political retaliation. Ethan, seated in a secure briefing room, realized what just happened. He was no longer a quiet analyst. He was now the first inside witness to step into a political firestorm. And somewhere out there, Forces were already preparing to break him. By midday, the political arena was no longer whispering. It was roaring. News alerts flashed across every major network. Loudspeaker, anonymous insider steps forward. An $8.7 million laundering probe. Loudspeaker, sources. Testimony could tie funds to Bondi-Patel web. Loudspeaker, Van Hollen expected to seek expanded subpoena authority. But just hours later, a different narrative started to emerge, one that smelled like calculated retaliation. A headline from a lesser-known, but aggressively partisan outlet read, Loudspeaker financial analyst under scrutiny for personal debt, now claiming to be whistleblower. They didn't name Ethan directly, but the details were specific enough for political insiders to identify him. The article suggested he had questionable judgment due to credit issues and employment instability. Inside Van Hollen's office, Marissa dropped the tablet, displaying the headline onto the desk. "They're moving fast," she said grimly. The senator remained calm. "That means they're afraid. Secure Ethan under federal whistleblower protection, now." Meanwhile, Ethan was watching the smear unfold in real time. He sat in a safe house room, the television muted, the captions rolling with half-truths and exaggerated claims about his personal life. He clenched his fists. A federal protection officer reassured him, "This is standard. They hit character first." But Ethan couldn't stop thinking, if they're doing this now, what comes next? On the other side of the fight, strategy meetings turned ruthless. In the penthouse, a strategist read the smear article aloud with satisfaction. This should plant enough doubt to question his credibility at hearings. But another operative was less satisfied. Doubt isn't enough. If he stays confident, they'll protect him. We need something stronger, something that makes him afraid to continue. A chilling silence followed. Then someone spoke softly but firmly. "We'll find a way to make cooperation feel too costly." Back in Washington, the Senate prepares for escalation. Van Hollen's legal team drafted the first wave of subpoenas targeting. White-heavy checkmarked the Miami consulting shell firm. White-heavy checkmarked the Denver nonprofit suspected of laundering. White-heavy checkmark internal emails from 2 supervision offices. White-heavy checkmark transaction approval logs involving flag transfers. A formal hearing request was being prepared with Ethan listed as a protected early witness. Marissa updated the team. "Their smear confirms Ethan's testimony hit a nerve. We must brace for attempted narrative sabotage, legal counterstrikes, maybe even intimidation." Van Hollen nodded. "Then we make sure the public sees this not as one man's testimony, but as the unveiling of a system." He paused, looking directly at the investigation board filled with names, arrows, and account links. This is not just about money. It's about power built on secrecy. Ethan received a text that night. Unknown number. Again, only 2 words. "You sure?" He stared at it. He didn't reply. But his fear just became real. Ethan sat on the edge of his temporary safe house bed, staring at the short text on his screen. "You sure?" Before he could even lock the phone, a second message appeared. "You still have time to walk away." He froze. His breathing became shallow. Someone out there knew he was talking and wanted him to stop. A federal protection officer knocked on the open door. "You okay?" Ethan hesitated, then handed over the phone. The officer scanned the screen, expression hardening. "We'll escalate protection. Stay put. We're reporting this immediately." But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling. They weren't just trying to discredit him now. They were trying to scare him silent. Meanwhile, subpoenas dropped like shockwaves. At precisely 9 a.m. the next morning, Van Hollen's team officially submitted a sweeping batch of subpoenas to the federal oversight system. Within minutes, news broke. Loudspeaker, Van Hollen launches official financial subpoena blitz targeting Shell Networks in $8.7 million probe. Loudspeaker, Patel-linked nonprofit, named in financial laundering investigation. Loudspeaker, hearing motion expected within 48 hours. Political commentators called it a declaration of war. But while supporters hailed the move as a push for transparency, others exploded with backlash. A known political ally of one of the implicated figures called the subpoenas an orchestrated smear campaign based on a single disgruntled employee. Van Hollen responded firmly in a press briefing. This investigation is built on documented financial evidence, not personal grievances. Anyone suggesting otherwise is afraid of what the paper trail reveals. The press room buzzed. In the shadows, panic escalates. Inside the penthouse command center, the atmosphere had shifted from anger to urgency. They're preparing hearings. Once this goes live, we lose narrative control. One operative warned. Another argued. We still have time to push Ethan over the edge. He's rattled. That text alone triggered a reaction. A strategist tapped a finger on a folder. If we can imply he violated compliance protocols himself while flagging the transfer, we can turn him into a suspect, not a witness. Someone else leaned forward. Discredit the witness. Stall the hearings. Fracture the investigation team. Make Van Hollen look reckless. A colder voice chimed in. And if that fails, we apply heavier pressure. Silence. They all understood what that meant, even if no one said it aloud. Back in the safe house, an agent briefed Ethan in a secure room. You're officially under expanded federal witness protection, he said. You'll have controlled access to communication now. But Ethan wasn't reassured. The idea of being protected only made him more aware of how real the threat had become. He finally spoke softly. Do they always go this far? The agent replied without hesitation. When big money and political survival are involved, they sometimes go further. Ethan nodded slowly, fear mixing with grim acceptance. He wasn't just testifying anymore. He was stepping into a battlefield. That same evening, Van Hollen received a call. Senator, Marissa said, her tone urgent. We just got confirmation from internal contacts. They're planning to launch a coordinated attempt to label Ethan as criminally negligent in financial handling. Van Hollen didn't flinch. Then we move faster. He turned toward the Capitol dome visible through his office window. The hearings are no longer optional. They're essential. The Capitol roared back to life as Van Hollen made the announcement live before a packed press room, flanked by 2 senior committee members. He delivered the words that would ignite a national firestorm. A formal hearing regarding the alleged 8.7 million laundering network involving shell entities linked to the Bondi-Patel financial web is now scheduled to begin next week. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters shouted over one another. Senator, will the whistleblower testify publicly? Do you have direct ties to political beneficiaries? Will you push for criminal charges if intent is proven? Van Hollen remained composed. We intend to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Transparency and accountability are not optional. They are fundamental. Meanwhile, across cable networks, talk shows, and streaming panels, the country split along familiar lines. Television Network A, whistleblower testimony could expose massive corruption scheme. Television Network B, hearing may be politically motivated theater targeting opposition figures. Television online analysts, if the shell companies are traced directly to political contributions, this isn't just scandal, it's systemic infiltration. In the safe house, Ethan watched silent. He sat on a sofa, guarded by security, as news anchors debated whether he would crack under pressure or emerge a political hero. He hated both narratives. He wasn't a crusader. He wasn't a rebel. He was just someone who didn't want to bury the truth. But now, the truth was dragging him into the center of a storm he'd never asked for. One of the protection officers entered the room gently. You'll need to begin prepping for testimony soon. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at the headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Loudspeaker unknown analyst may become key witness in explosive Senate probe. He whispered to himself, unknown won't be unknown for long. Across the political battlefield, counter-strategies intensify. In a private call among high-tier strategists linked to the accused circles, panic and calculation fused into ruthless intent. He's not ready for public scrutiny, one said. We release selective leaks that suggest he falsified earlier transfer reports to boost his career. Another snapped back, make him radioactive before he steps in front of the microphone. But a colder voice cut through the noise. If he still testifies after the smear, he becomes more dangerous. If fear doesn't stop him, embarrassment must. Silence followed, heavy with unspoken threats. Back in Van Hollen's war room, preparations for the hearing intensified. Security, legal strategy, witness coaching. Every detail had to be airtight. Marissa reviewed Ethan's deposition notes, highlighting key segments. She turned to the senator. If Ethan holds firm, he'll be credible. But if he hesitates, even once, they'll weaponize it. Van Hollen replied, then we make sure he knows he won't stand alone. Late that night, Ethan stood by the window as city lights flickered outside. His phone had been secured, his movements controlled, his privacy monitored for his own safety. But inside his mind, the doubt grew louder. Was telling the truth worth becoming a target? As he closed the curtains, a simple truth settled in. If he stepped forward now, there would be no going back. 3 days before the hearing. Ethan sat at a long conference table inside a secured federal briefing room, flanked by Van Hollen's legal advisors, witness protection officers, and 2 Senate Council representatives. The walls felt too close. The lights felt too bright. Marissa Clark stood at the front with a stack of notes. Today is a simulation of what you'll face publicly, she explained. This isn't to scare you. It's to prepare you for what they're going to throw at you. A lawyer with years of Senate hearing experience stepped forward, cold and unblinking. I'll be acting as opposition counsel, he warned Ethan. I'm going to be harsh. You must answer with clarity, not emotion. Ethan nodded, attempting a confident breath that didn't quite land. The mock questioning began. Mr. Roy, the mock opponent began sharply. Isn't it true you were under internal review for delayed compliance reporting? Ethan blinked, startled. That was an automated flag, not disciplinary, he stammered. But you did fail an internal audit checkpoint, did you not? I corrected it immediately. Isn't it true you were struggling financially at the time? That personal debt could have influenced your decision to exaggerate a financial anomaly in order to elevate your standing. Ethan felt his pulse accelerate. That's not what happened. So, what did happen, Mr. Roy? Did you witness laundering, or did you simply hope to gain attention by inventing one? His throat dried. The words tangled. I saw a flag transaction. I knew it matched a pattern. A pattern you assumed was criminal because it involved high-profile donors. The room felt silent, waiting to see if he'd collapse. Marissa quietly stepped in. Pause. She walked toward Ethan, voice steady but firm. You need to own your truth. They will try to turn your uncertainty into dishonesty. Don't let them. Ethan breathed deeply, shaking the tension off as best he could. Again, the mock interrogator said. This time, Ethan was ready. Yes, he said clearly. A compliance flag appeared. Yes, I raised it. And yes, I was told not to pursue it because it was politically protected. That's precisely why I'm here. The interrogator nodded, satisfied. Marissa gave a faint, approving smile. Outside the training room, Van Hollen observed from behind a privacy screen. His legal counsel spoke quietly to him. He's not fully steady yet, but with 2 more sessions he'll strengthen. Van Hollen nodded. The truth is strong. We just need to make him believe it's stronger than fear. Elsewhere, strategy turns darker. In the penthouse war room, frustration simmered. The hearing date is locked. The whistleblower is being hardened for testimony, one strategist reported. Another slammed a fist against the table. The smear isn't slow in momentum. We need a deeper disruption. A operative leaned back, eyes narrowed. Then we change the battlefield. If they're preparing a star witness, we undermine the stage. How? A cold smile. By making the hearing itself unstable. Night falls. Back in the safe house, Ethan stood alone in the bathroom, gripping the sink, looking at his reflection. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. But behind the fear was a spark of resolve forming. He whispered to himself, I'm not doing this for them.